holiday season. This is the post-family barbecue debrief that you've always wanted, where you either arm yourself with some serious comebacks or finally say what you wish you'd said. Let's get into it. I ain't afraid of a myth. Let's use some science, not an online article written by an idiot. I ain't afraid of no ghost. Come get me.
Sometimes when I'm awake and my mind wanders, I think the only thing that got me through today, particularly in the school holidays, was the iPad. And then I instantly feel mum guilt. What if what I'm using is actually harming them? Sometimes I use an iPad to avoid yelling at my children. Sometimes I say, let's get out the iPad, because I know that I don't have any backup and I don't want to say something I'll regret. And an iPad is my way of having time to regulate myself. There's a split second when I use the iPad where I feel relief, but then something else hits. Screens are rewiring their brain. This isn't harmless. This is lazy parenting. It's causing long-term damage. And then I feel instantly guilty. There was a podcast episode recently released called Digital Addiction: How Screens Are Rewiring Our Brains and What to Do About It, with Dr. Mark Williams on Better Than Yesterday, which is Osha's new podcast. And this is why I have brought on Amanda Moses to debunk this podcast episode. Welcome to you, Amanda.
Thank you for having me.
Beautiful. If you don't know who Amanda Moses is, she's been on the podcast a few times. I'll put her related episodes into the show notes. Amanda is a senior psychologist, a board-approved supervisor. She's an ADHD and autism assessor. She has over 14 years of clinical experience across Australia and the UK. Amanda specialises in complex assessments when presentations overlap, when they don't fit neatly inside a box, and her work focuses on making sense of nuanced and often misunderstood profiles. Amanda Moses's Instagram would be probably my top 3 content to consume. I love it because she gets in there and really tells it like it is. And her work really sits inside research, but also real life and lived experience. And she's deeply committed to neuro-affirming care, ethical assessment, and improving how psychologists are trained and supported across the profession. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you, Jane.
How did this all happen?
It all started because a few people tagged me. I hadn't seen the clip myself, but this so often happens where people might comment on a clip and say, Amanda Moses, want your thoughts? And so I went and checked it out, of course, and it was just this kind of, it was like a 30-second soundbite, basically, where the neuroscientist, I think Mark's his name, I can't remember, was saying that psychologists now believe that there is this digital form of ADHD that we're calling ADHD. And so someone had tagged me and I just replied saying, yep, I'll come back to this soon. Just spiraled, I think. I think he wasn't really happy with people in the comments disagreeing with what he and Mark had to say. And yeah, it just became a whole big thing, basically.
So let's jump on and listen to what Osha had to say. I have got the audio recordings. We're going to start off with the first clip.
We now are less productive than we were 15 years ago. We're all feeling busy today, not because we're getting more done, but because we're actually getting more distracted. If you turn off all your notifications, within 2 weeks, you'll improve your mental health.
Huh. Why?
Because it's constantly distracting you from what you actually need to be concentrating on, and it's increasing your stress levels because each time you get one, you're stressed, right? It's an alert. It's actually designed based on your amygdala response, which sets off your fight, flight, or freeze response, right? And so that increases your heart rate and all of those things, which increases the likelihood of you having a heart attack.
This is such a wild jump from getting notifications on your phone to having a heart attack. But the research on stress and heart disease is actually pretty specific about what the real danger is. And it's not a notification on your phone. It's chronic stress. And that's stress that would grind away at you over months and years, and what that does to your body over time. And I think that's a very different claim to what he has just made. And the strongest study that I can point to where acute stress, like a one-off stressful moment, was actually linked to a cardiac event was done in people who already had a heart disease. And that's going to be a completely different situation to a healthy person getting a notification. So what's happened here is he's taken these findings that apply to a very specific circumstance and stitched them together into this one really scary sounding chain where your phone goes off, amygdala fires, heart rate spikes, heart attack. And each of those things could be real in isolation, but the way that he's connected them just isn't what the science shows. I'm curious what you think, though. What are your perspectives?
Being a good mum whatever that label is, requires us to respond to hundreds of DMs a week. For example, I've got 3 kids in sport. It's fucking phenomenal with how many responses you have to get. Play dates, paying for things. So at the same time, you have to be on top of it all. And it's all on your phone. Nothing's even on paper anymore.
Yeah.
So what a way to shame and guilt mums. What do we do when we need a permission form?
What he's trying to say in this specific clip is about like the link between being on your phone and your mental health. If you turn all your notifications off within 2 weeks, you'll improve your mental health. What study does that come from? Because that's such a huge leap. And I found a study done in 2024. And what they actually found was that the people who restricted social media reported relatively few benefits and even some potential costs, which was things like increased negative emotion. And when people restricted digital media or just use of their smartphone in general, there was like slight improvements in well-being, but nothing substantial. And when I was looking at that, I was thinking to myself, it was interesting to me that the one app which we know is really used for connection, right? Like social media. I'm not saying it's always the most genuine connection. Sometimes we're just scrolling, but social media is inherently social in that sometimes we're there to interact with others or just get that little bit of human connection in whatever form we can. Whereas when I think of digital media or just my use of my phone, if I'm not on social media, what am I doing on my phone? I'm probably working, right? It's something productive and it's something to do with life admin or productivity. That's not enjoyment, right? Like usually social media is where we unwind and we scroll and whatnot. So I was thinking to myself, like, what are the differences there and why did this study find that? And I thought, I wonder if really it's more about what you're doing on your phone rather than having notifications or use of your phone in general. Because if I'm on my phone constantly working and never switching off out of hours and I'm just constantly on the go and it's all about productivity, sure, of course, I'm going to be constantly stressed. But if I'm using my phone and I'm using that to connect, to socialize, it actually showed here that when people were removed from that, it actually increased their negative emotion. And that made sense to me in that context of it's going to depend on what we're doing. We need notifications to remind us of stuff. I'm not going to remember anything without a notification. If I don't write it down, it's literally gone from my mind a second later. And so I feel like his views are just so simplistic in this context. And like, we obviously need to consider other factors. What do you think?
What I thought was very similar to you. I have a very poor working memory and I've just got no idea what's going on a lot of the time unless I write it down. So I do have my phone with me a lot of the time for that reason.
Yeah.
I think that's very different to just what he's referring to, like getting a notification and then you can have a heart attack.
Yeah, like extreme.
Let's jump to the next clip because this is a cracker.
A toddler or a newborn whose parents or carers are on the phone a lot have abnormal ability to recognize facial expressions. And that's because as a toddler, as a baby, what happens is you're at the park and you fall over and you feel bad and then you look up to your carer and they're looking sad because they just saw you fall over and you understand that facial expression goes with this feeling. Or you do something fun and you feel good because you did something fun and you look up to your carer and they smile and you go, that's facial expression goes with this feeling of feeling happy. But if your carer is on the phone, they're not changing their facial expressions because they're not seeing what you're doing. So you associate what we call still face, neutral face, with all of their different emotions. So we've got kids now who are going to preschool who don't use their facial expressions. They have still face effect where they have a neutral face instead of actually having the different facial expressions, because of the fact that carers are on their phones and not actually responding to them, which then impacts on their ability to make friends. Because how do you make friends? You walk up to someone, you smile at them. But if you walk up to someone and you've got a neutral face because you think that's what you're supposed to do, then the other person is going to look at you weird and probably walk away. And so a lot of kids, especially in preschool now, are having trouble making friends because they don't know how to use their facial expression. So we're now having to in preschools actually teach kids how to use their facial expression. And even in primary school, where now, there's social emotional learning programs going on in primary schools to teach kids how to use facial expressions, and this is a happy face and this is a sad face and which was normally taught by the parents as they were.
Well, they weren't teaching, though. It was just part of.
So many claims. Like, it's big. There are just so many huge leaps from small things, right? The first thing I want to respond to is about the still face. So he's referencing still face, which there is legitimate research about still face. And there's good experimental evidence going back decades that shows that when a carer becomes unresponsive, so blank face, not engaging, their babies get distressed. And yes, studies have also replicated that in more recent years with phones specifically. So if a parent picks up their phone mid-interaction, you will see infants showing more negative affect, like facial expression, more distress, trying to get the parent's attention back. That's real, but that's real regardless of what they're picking up or what they're doing, which is leading them not to respond to their child. But what he's left out here is that in 2024, another study where they specifically tested whether phones themselves were the issue. Is it phones or is it just the distraction? And what they found was that there wasn't any significant difference between parents being distracted by a phone versus being distracted by a pen and paper questionnaire. It's the distraction that's the issue, not necessarily the device. My first response before I even went and researched, surely back in the 50s, even when we had stay-at-home housewives, they were distracted by books, radio, the TV. Like before we even had devices, we've always found ways to be distracted because humans inherently are looking for ways to be stimulated. We're bored. We're looking for things. I'm sure mothers and fathers and parents in general have found a million ways to be distracted from their kids because we need to switch off too. So I don't think it's necessarily the smartphone, but I feel like this jump from devices and parents are just looking at the device and never responding to their kids, huge leap, to now these kids have a permanent still face. Like there's no peer-reviewed research or evidence of a generation of children who's just walking around with permanent expressionless faces because their parents had iPhones. Like the claim is just doing a lot of heavy lifting with zero receipts. It up because also like I could be expressionless because I'm autistic. There are 100 reasons why I could be expressionless or have differences in facial expressions. Like it's just such a big jump. And then to say that this is also leading for them to not be able to make friends. Like it's jump after jump. Like parents using phone, still face, child learns neutral face. They can't smile at people. They can't make friends. Like all these jumps from a parent sitting on their phone.
I didn't notice any real research or references in any of the show notes. I asked one of my friends, she works in kindergartens. She helps do programs. I asked her, is there still, I can't even get the words out, is there still faced effect that you are working with now with the kindies? She goes, what was that? She had no idea what I was talking about. So I do like the way, and we'll come to it later with how he represents what industry professionals are saying, because I don't think he has any experience in kindergartens or daycares to be making those claims. From what I understand, he's a university professor, and I didn't see any experience that he'd had in any kind of preschool setting.
I'm not sure what the links are with like his experience and child development or even ADHD, but I know that in the comments of the Instagram and the TikTok and whatnot, she was very adamant about saying he's a well-renowned neuroscientist, and in our circle, he said, which I think he must reference or mean, I don't know if he means celebrities or I don't know what he means by that, but in our circle, he's well regarded.
I thought he was trying to say he represented psychologists. That was my take on it. I was like,
yeah, because he specifically referenced psychologists, and I don't want to discredit someone I don't know. I think what we're trying to do is discredit the information, not the person. We don't know where these claims are coming from because there's nothing to back them up. But I think we need to be transparent when we make big claims to make sure that we can at least back up what we're saying and show how we backed it up. Treat our audience with that respect, that just because I say something, it's true. No, I'm going to show you how I came to that, and I'll give you some receipts.
Absolutely. And if it's opinion, your personal opinion, I think say that.
Absolutely.
If that's his personal opinion, and it might be, he's entitled to that. So this kind of leads into the next clip, which is around ADHD specifically. I'll play that.
The more likely they will be diagnosed with ADHD, more likely they'll have attentional problems, more likely they'll have problems with ability to write, more problems with movement, so sports and all those things when they get to school, more problems with socializing.
I thought something like ADHD was something that you're born with.
Well, no. Well, there's now discussions amongst a lot of psychologists that we need to actually split the diagnosis of ADHD into two different forms of ADHD. One, which is a genetic form, which was the traditional one that we know about, and the other one would be a digital ADHD, which is caused by devices. And they believe that probably the majority of ADHD cases now are actually caused by devices, not actually caused by genetic.
Sorry, I have to jump in straight away. The words that stuck out to me were, they believe that. He didn't even say, I believe it. I thought that was representing like assessors.
As someone who assesses ADHD, who trains psychologists in assessing ADHD, I'm very heavily involved in this space. So I feel like my perspective has a little bit of credibility, and I don't believe what he's saying to be true because I've never heard it. And I feel like I would have given my position in this particular niche area. But what I did was I was like, okay, look, let's just play the devil's advocate. What if there's something I have missed? What if there's something in the research that maybe is talking about a digital ADHD? Because I've seen so much research about really talking about digital use, ADHD, screen times, all this. We all know that there's stuff that has been debated about this for so long, and the general consensus has been that actually, like, it's a bit of a chicken or egg situation where they're like, are screens causing ADHD? Or is it that ADHDers are more likely to be attracted to screens? ADHD is one of the most heritable conditions in psychiatry. 74 and 80%, meaning that it's genetic. It's not caused by the environment. There wasn't even one study, Paul, that ever actually looked at ADHD. So only measured ADHD symptom level, how inattentive or hyperactive. None of them looked at whether a child actually received a clinical ADHD diagnosis. Researchers in this study for the systematic review did themselves interestingly flag, there's this paragraph that grabbed me straight away. They flagged that their findings could be misused to speculate about a future digital media-induced ADHD diagnosis. And they explicitly warned against jumping to that conclusion. In this, we can see that this is a conversation people might want to have, but our research does not support it. And doing so raises serious risks around stigma and whether people would still be entitled to treatment. And the bottom line that they actually draw at the end of this review is that the relationship is complex and it's bi-directional, meaning that we don't really know what's potentially influencing one. That, yes, we know ADHD kids are more likely to use screens. And when they've looked at studies of screen use and ADHD symptoms, not diagnoses, maybe there could be more ADHD symptoms in kids using screens, but is it because they actually maybe have ADHD and that's why they're using the screens? Like, we can't even draw a conclusion. And this is what they're saying, that it's too complex a relationship. There's this bi-directional thing happening here where we just don't know enough really to say, but what we can say for certain is ADHD is genetic. So chances are this is not being caused by digital use. It's likely that ADHDers are just more drawn to it. They might be just more drawn to that and prone to be hooked in and locked in when they get onto that screen if it's interesting enough. So I feel like if that neuroscientist was referencing this particular study, they specifically caution against claims that screens cause ADHD and digital ADHD. And he's used this to claim that screens cause ADHD. And I feel like it's just this significant misrepresentation of what we actually know in the literature.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things that stuck out to me was, which one is it? Because in one breath, it's all about ADHD isn't real. All of the adults that are coming out now don't really have it. We didn't have screens until we were in our early 20s.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we didn't grow up with iPads. So which one is it? Because if it's just a digital screen is causing it, and that's the majority apparently, then what about all these adults coming out? Which myth is more wrong, and the myths don't even match?
They don't match at all. So much stigma already in the, like, towards the ADHD community. And I feel like it's like they don't even see that these claims are just not adding up, and they're not matching what the research shows, again, about it being highly genetic. And I feel that there's just this sense of, oh, it's just being overdiagnosed and On one hand, it's overdiagnosed, and who knows who's to blame for that? TikTok, apparently, or psychologists, because they're just diagnosing anyone. Or we've also got on the other hand that, oh, it's the screens are causing ADHD. I don't know, man, just pick one. But either way, like they don't add up and they don't reflect anything in the literature anyway. I'm looking at this from a different perspective, thinking, man, how many people have we let down over decades that we missed? And how many people have we failed by missing at a time where they could have really benefited from some support? Now they're coming through thanks to access to more information, and we're able to educate ourselves in a way we were never able to. So of course it makes sense that people are learning more, are exposed to more, and are understanding themselves more, and are coming forward being like, hey, I think I might have this, or I think my child might have this. That is a normal response to having more access to information. And I think that's a great thing. And I also think we should really be holding ourselves more accountable of we've actually let down so many people, as opposed to looking for things to blame it on, like screen use.
Totally. And I think a lot of mums on this podcast are looking for information that they can get to help themselves if they cannot afford a psychology session.
Absolutely.
And the part that gets me is I wouldn't want a mum who has a child who's been diagnosed with ADHD to remove a screen from a younger sibling, thinking that caused it. So people are believing this information because
Of
a lot of
course.
them don't have access to psychology sessions or to see professionals.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is where it comes back to that responsibility we hold about what information we share, because when you have a big platform, or when you are in a position of power and trust, like if you have a title like neuroscientist, psychologist, and we're going to come out and say things and make claims, of course people are going to take what we say at face value, because they would look at us and assume, okay, they must know what they're talking about, right? We need to take that seriously and take that responsibility seriously of how the community perceives us and what we have to say. And even someone like Mark, who's come out with no receipts, like people aren't going to question him because he's a neuroscientist. And this is where I think we've got to, again, treat our audience with respect. And like, we can't just make these big claims without evidence and not realizing how what we're going to say is going to potentially really influence society because of who you are and your title and what position you hold.
Agreed. And I always talk about Uncle Ned, which just represents that annoying uncle. Sorry for all the Neds out there. And I always think about, does that feed Uncle Ned? And Uncle Ned is going to be there going, I told you it was the iPad. I'm going to play one more.
And if you're actually spending more time online than you are with real people, then again, you've got a problem in your social life. Obviously, we all spend a lot of time on screens, or many of us do at work. But in your social life, if you're spending more time on screens than you are in your social life, then you've got a problem. You need to be spending time with people, because that's what makes us, that's what really makes us who we are as humans.
It was a big jump. And I think like the question for me becomes like, what exactly do you think we're doing online? Because I think a lot of the time, for many of us, there is connection online and there is connection with real people online. Just because it's online doesn't make the connection any less valid or authentic. And I think even if we were to look at younger generations, online is a huge way now that people do meet, whether it be for dating, for friendship. I know myself, I formed a lot of friendships and connections just through online spaces. And I think that if we even consider autistic people and some of the barriers that they may face, or anyone with greater disabilities, like if you had real barriers to being able to socialize in person, or even just getting out of your house for whatever reason, human connection is undeniably so important. But are we trying to say that one form of connection, being in person, is more valid than another, right? Online or a phone call or something like that. I think the importance is that we're getting connection. Of course, ideally, it would be lovely to sit one-on-one with those people you love and are connected with, but that's not always possible. And I've seen this a bit in the psych community too, where there's this kind of sense of we've got to get them out meeting people in the real world, and this isn't really a friendship if it's online. I'm like, no, that's not really fair, because who gets to determine what a real connection is? And I think I've noticed for autistic people how it can really break down some barriers, because when you're not having to decode people's facial expressions and undertones, and when you can connect potentially even through a shared interest online or meet in forums, it removes those barriers and pressures that you often get in an in-person interaction. And that can sometimes move to real human connection in person at a later stage. But I've seen for many autistic people how it's really opened up the ability to connect for them and meet people that they wouldn't have previously had without access to online spaces. So I just don't think it's fair to devalue or criticize connections that are made and maintained online. I don't think that's fair.
I couldn't agree more. I did feel, hard to say any other word, but pissed off when I heard it. It struck a emotional chord for me. For women who are in regional remote areas or who lack the confidence to turn up to the play group or the mothers group. Like, I love my Facebook group that we have. We've got nearly 7,000 women, and I think I've moderated twice. Like, it's so good. And a lot of them will make friends, and I encourage them, make friends, DM people. And we have a hashtag vent. So basically, don't offer fucking problem solving and tell people to go read. They just want somebody to have a bit of a vent to. And then people write back and put, get it, I felt like that too. My kids didn't stop fighting. And having that piece of validation is so important. It doesn't matter where it comes from. So I did feel like that really invalidates mums who connect online, kids who struggle at school, who don't have any friends. And I just got really fucked off with the whole thing, to be honest. I was like, that's about put the icing on the cake for me, because I wouldn't want mums to read that, hear that, and think that's real, and also to block their kids from online friendship and say they're not real.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much more to this than just human connection can only be done in person. I feel like he's just missed so much context around why people might choose online as a space to connect or form friendships, and maybe the positive benefits of what that could allow people, as you said, who are maybe more disadvantaged in terms of like where they're located or maybe other barriers they're facing to in-person connection. And I think we don't really have a right to just say that the only way we can and should connect with people is in person, face to face, and anything else is not real. Of course, when it comes to children, I think it goes without saying that, yeah, we've got to be more mindful in terms of safety because we know there are predators online. This is just about saying that this form of connection is no less valid and no less meaningful and may actually be somebody's only accessible way of getting connection. And that has to count for something and that has to mean something. And I just don't think it's fair to outrightly just say, no, that's not okay. That's not human.
Final clip.
General population has been getting dumber.
Just blanket statement.
Population has been getting dumber.
And I actually tried to find the context of that in a paragraph. What do you mean by that? Is it IQ? And there wasn't even really a context. It was just, we're getting dumber. It's just, I suppose your message really has been around blanket statements, hasn't it?
I encourage the audience and anyone listening to this to always just question what you hear, what somebody is saying, no matter who they are or what position they hold. We don't need to take things as absolute truths. I encourage you to try and think critically and don't take things at face value, because you can see how even people like that who do have a title and do have degrees and are a professor are saying things that don't have any scientific basis to them. And so I always encourage you to try and think critically for yourself. I think it is okay to start questioning things and try and do some sort of research on your own, come to your own conclusions, because things like this, these big blanket statements with no evidence to back them up, no receipts, I feel like they're quite problematic and we need to be mindful of them.
I think that is a great finish. Thank you very much. That was enlightening. I'm going to put in the show notes references to Amanda's articles, and then everyone has all the information and you can make up your own minds. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much, Amanda. I loved it. I was really looking forward to this.
Me too. Thanks for having me.